northeastern Utah. We were 10 miles from the Colorado border, and it was right on the Green River next to Indian reservations and just high plains desert. So it was very free. There was no one around. We were literally 50 miles from town and didn't really live with anybody. It was just my family and an encampment. And the workers would come in during the day and then they would go home at night. And so I just could, it was an amazing amount of freedom just because it was so isolated. We lived in Little Bonanza until I was 16. I rode to school an hour and a half every day, one way. So I was on a bus 3 hours a day from the time I was in first grade until I was in high school, just to go to school and be tortured. There was an interesting gay life in Vernal. Who would have known? Somehow or another I was sort of a leader of the pack. I gave a lot of people permission to come out of the closet, if you can imagine that. So I had several friends in high school who were gay, and there was just, you know, you sort of learn who all else is. Moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, and just sort of took care of myself from the time I was 19 when I moved to Salt Lake. And worked in private clubs, underage. You know. So that was fun. I was in an interesting little mafia club for years. It was a supper club with dancing and music, and so it was I mean, it was kind of crazy and everything I shouldn't have been doing at 19 and 20 years of age, so it was perfect. I actually had a partner in Salt Lake City for 4 years, and when we broke up, my brother was down here having his first child. He and his wife had just recently married, and they were having their first baby, so I came down to help them, and just stayed. I met my partner 2 weeks after I moved here. We met at a volunteer training class for AIDS in Nevada, actually. And I walked in the room and there were 53 people in the room, which just kind of blew me away, and it was men and women, and you know, it was not the demographics I was expecting. And I'd really been longing for that, I think. The crisis had been going on for a while and I'd wanted to be involved and just had never gotten there, and my previous partner didn't want anything to do with AIDS, you know, because it was the unknown. And I felt the opposite. I felt compelled to be involved with it. So I was new to the city and wanted to meet some people, and it just seemed like a good way. And there was my partner. And then Terry chased me for about 6 or 8 months, and I started working for the Tiger. I was doing other things. I worked in the restaurant industry most of the time, and then I started working with my partner who owned a small flower shop. And we started building that together. I came into the business and learned the business, and within 2 years we had expanded it to our second shop. Probably mostly to get rid of me, but here, you go do this! One of the reasons I chose to become a sister was because my partner became HIV positive 5 years ago in our relationship. And it all seemed the same. It seemed like 1986 all over again. He didn't want to tell his family. He didn't think, you know, the employees weren't to know. There was an intense amount of shame around it, as far as I define it. Everyone's entitled to that choice, absolutely, and I understand the privacy, and I have no problem with that. I guess what strikes me sometimes is what drives the privacy. And if you can be at peace with yourself and have a place of pride and speak of it if someone asks you, then I think there's a comfort with it. But when you can't identify with an illness, be it cancer or diabetes or, you know, whatever the cause, it makes me feel like there's a guilt to it, or there's a shame to it. You know, like, had you done something differently, maybe you wouldn't be dealing with this. And Terry flat out told me, you know, it's a social disease. I caught this sexually. You know, there's a stigma involved with that. And then lo and behold, you know, Sister Lucy and Sister Glow, who were friends of mine, you know, Daniel and Tracy, approached me about starting the Sisters. And the timing was in some ways perfect because I was looking for an outlet. You know, I felt frustrated by Terry's illness and his need to keep everything quiet. I felt isolated, you know, until he got to the stage where he could allow me to speak freely. and I needed an outlet. And I also wanted to be closer to my activism. As the business had grown, I wrote a lot of checks to charity organizations, to the organizations in town, and I would help with events here and there. But I wasn't dedicated to it the way Terry and I had been for the first 6 or 7 years when we were doing hospice outreach and working with HIV patients, very closely, and kind of in the trenches of the illness when we first started out. And I learned a lot in that experience, and so I think I wanted that back. And when I discovered that the sisters were about no stigmatic guilt, about accepting who you are and being who you were, it spoke to me. And I felt like there was an opportunity for me to possibly help people and deliver a different message to the community, because it seemed really inane that after 25 years, the disease still carried the shame. So that's how I stepped my big size 11 foot into being a sister. I truly didn't know what I was getting into. I knew Daniel when he was with his partner before he discovered out he was HIV positive. When his partner was passing away, we were working with AFAN and we were part of that process with them. So, Daniel was at a difficult point in his life, and I'm sure he may have spoke of this, Sister Glo may have spoke of this earlier, but it's just funny how the timing seemed so right. Sister Lucy had time on her plate. She'd been recently, stepped down from the Ryan White Council, and she was really looking for something to dedicate herself to. And Glo needed some way to channel her energies into something healthy. And in many ways, I think the sisterhood has been a savior for us. It gave us new purposes, a new direction in some ways for all of us. I think even so for Sister Sue. So it was very interesting in the power that was created, by 6 people who really didn't know each other, that well, that we not closely in any way, shape, or form. That their focus was so intense and that their commitment was that solid. I think it's really rare to find a nonprofit or a volunteer organization where that doesn't fall apart fairly quickly. It's easy to kind of gather the juices all at once, but to maintain it for any kind of longevity. I was here with the start of AFAN. I watched AFAN go through boards, every year, or every, it seems there were constantly changes going on within that. And I look at some of the other nonprofits and what they've gone through to get to where they are today. And it's part of the process. It's not that it's a right or a wrong thing, but I feel blessed that we've been able to hold the core element together just because we're smaller and we almost need that as a family to grow the sisters into what the potential is. Because when I started, I saw the sisters being an AFAN, even without knowing what we were going to do or what was happening, but or a golden rainbow, or I saw us being a force in the community. And that was truly before I understood even what we were capable of or what we might do. It was in the very beginning stages.